The snow had melted wrong. That was the first thing Sienna Shaw noticed when she woke screaming for the third time that night. Not melted into water, no, it had rotted. In her dreams, the snow from that Christmas massacre turned gray, then black, crawling with fingerprints that didn't belong to anyone alive. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it again. Art the clown standing in the glow of Christmas lights, head tilted, smile painted too wide, as if the universe itself had cracked and that grin was the fracture. Sienna sat up in bed, gasping, her heart battering her ribs like it wanted out. The room was dark, but not comforting dark. It felt occupied. She reached instinctively for the sword that wasn't there anymore, the one that had once burned with something holy, something ancient. The sword that had saved her. And taken something from her in return. She was alive. That alone felt wrong. Outside, Miles County had returned to its routine. People went back to work, kids went back to school, and the town quietly agreed to never speak of what happened that Christmas Eve. Officially, Art the Clown was declared dead. Unofficially, nobody believed it. Evil like that didn't die. It waited. Sienna slid out of bed and crossed to the mirror. Her reflection stared back at her like a stranger wearing her face. The scars along her arms and torso were pale now, but she could still feel them, burning, itching, whispering. Sometimes, when she stared too long, she swore her reflection smiled a second too late. "Not you," she muttered. "Not again." Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She froze. No one texted her this late. No one who still talked to her, anyway. Slowly, she picked it up. The screen lit her face in cold blue. Unknown number, he's not done. Her stomach dropped. She typed back with shaking thumbs. "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then the message came. "Someone you thought was dead changed everything." A memory slammed into her, blood pooling on tile, body crumpled wrong, eyes staring at nothing. That night had been chaos, screams overlapping, time collapsing in on itself. There had been one death that never sat right with her. One moment she'd replayed over and over, always ending the same way. Always wrong. Her phone buzzed again. "Gabby is in trouble." The room seemed to tilt. Gabby. Her little cousin. The reason she'd survived. The reason she still breathed. Sienna's chest tightened until she thought she might black out. "Where is she?" Sienna typed. This time, there was a pause, long enough for dread to bloom into something suffocating. Then, "Closer to hell than you think." The lights flickered. Sienna looked up just as the bulb above her popped with a sharp crack, plunging the room into darkness. Her phone light became the only thing anchoring her to reality. She could hear her own breathing, ragged, uneven, and something else beneath it. A faint squeak. Rubber on tile. Her blood went cold. "No," she whispered. "You're dead." The squeak came again. Slow. Deliberate. Somewhere in the apartment, a door creaked open. Sienna backed away, her spine hitting the wall. Her mind screamed logic at her, PTSD, hallucination, trauma response, but her body knew better. It remembered the rules. When Art was near, reality bent. Sound came wrong. Time hiccuped. Then she saw him. Not fully. Not yet. A white-gloved hand slid around the corner of the hallway, fingers curling one by one in a mock wave. The rest of him stayed hidden, like a joke waiting for its punchline. Art the Clown did not need to speak. His presence was language enough. Sienna's legs moved before her mind caught up. She bolted for the kitchen, grabbing the first thing her hand touched, a carving knife. Pathetic. She knew it. He knew it too. Art stepped into view. He looked older. The grease paint was cracked now, splitting around his grin as if something inside him was pushing out. His eyes, those empty, shining pits, burned with something new. Something ancient. Behind him, the air rippled, like heat over asphalt. Sienna felt it then. Not just Art, but what wore him. What drove him. A presence vast and hungry, pressing against reality from the other side. "You're not real," she said, forcing the words out. "You're a memory." Art cocked his head. Slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A red bow. "Gabby's." Sienna screamed. The walls peeled. Paint bubbled and sloughed off like wet skin, revealing something black and pulsing underneath. Symbols burned into the walls, old, jagged, wrong. She recognized them without knowing how. This wasn't just a return. This was an origin. Somewhere far away, a man everyone believed dead took his first breath in a place without light. And deeper still, beneath snow, beneath blood, beneath history, the thing that made Art the Clown smiled for the very first time. The final act had begun. The hospital basement smelled like bleach, rust, and lies. Sienna stood at the bottom of the stairwell, fingers clenched so tight around her jacket sleeves that her knuckles ached. The message from the unknown number had come with coordinates, old service tunnels beneath Miles County Memorial, sealed after a fire years ago. Places where records vanished. Places where death didn't always stick. She told herself she was here for Gabby. That was true. But another truth throbbed beneath it. Some part of her needed answers. About Art. About the thing inside him. About why she was still alive when she shouldn't be. The fluorescent lights flickered as she stepped into the corridor. Half of them were dead. The rest hummed like insects trapped in glass. Her footsteps echoed too loudly, stretching out behind her as if something followed 1 second too late. She reached the end of the hall and stopped. A door stood open. Inside, the room was wrong. No hospital equipment. No gurneys. Just concrete walls and a circle carved into the floor, deep grooves cut by hand, filled with something dark and dried. Symbols twisted around the circle, the same ones she'd seen peeling through her apartment walls. Her scars burned. Someone breathed behind her. Sienna spun, knife raised. A man stood there, hands up, eyes wide with terror. Mid-30s. Hollow cheeks. A beard grown wild, like he'd forgotten mirrors existed. "Don't," he whispered. "Please. I'm not him." She lowered the knife slightly, confusion cutting through the fear. "Who are you?" The man swallowed. "My name is Jonathan Miles." The name hit her like a punch. Jonathan Miles had died during the Christmas massacre. She remembered the report. Burned body. Dental match. Closed case. "You're dead," she said. "I know," he replied softly. "I was supposed to be." He stepped into the light, and that's when she saw it. The wound. A massive scar ran from his collarbone down his torso, the flesh warped and puckered, as if something had torn its way out of him rather than in. The skin around it was faintly discolored, almost gray. "He cut me open," Jonathan said, voice shaking. "Not to kill me. To make room." Sienna felt sick. For what? Jonathan's eyes slid to the circle on the floor. For him. A low sound vibrated through the room. Not a noise exactly, more like pressure. The air thickened, heavy and damp, carrying the faint smell of circus grease paint and old iron. "He wasn't always Art," Jonathan continued. "Not like this. He was a man once. A nobody. A performer who couldn't make people laugh." Sienna's heart pounded. "You're saying Art the Clown was human?" "Yes. And no." Jonathan shook his head, tears shining. Something found him. Something old. It feeds on spectacle. On suffering witnessed. The more people watch, the stronger it becomes. Images flashed in Sienna's mind, phones raised, videos shared, Art's killings replayed online like sick entertainment. He was chosen, Jonathan said. But I was the vessel. The lights flickered violently. From the far end of the corridor came the sound of dragging metal. Sienna whispered, "He knows we're here." Jonathan nodded. "He always knows." The dragging stopped. Silence pressed in, so thick Sienna could hear her own pulse roaring in her ears. Then laughter echoed down the hall. Not loud. Not manic. Just, amused. Art stepped into view slowly, as if savoring the moment. The cracks in his makeup had spread, revealing raw darkness beneath, like the paint was barely containing what lived inside him. His grin widened impossibly as his eyes flicked between them. Jonathan backed away, shaking. "He needs me alive. That's why he brought me back. I anchor him here." Art raised a finger and wagged it playfully. Then he mimed tearing something in half. Sienna moved without thinking. She grabbed Jonathan's arm and pulled him toward the opposite exit as Art lunged forward, movements jerky and wrong, like a puppet yanked by invisible strings. They ran. Behind them. The hallway warped, walls stretching, floor buckling like soft flesh. Art's laughter bounced off every surface, multiplying, overlapping. They burst through a door and into the night air. Cold slammed into Sienna's lungs. Snow crunched underfoot, clean and white, mocking her with its innocence. They didn't stop running until they reached Jonathan's car, parked crookedly near the tree lean. Inside the car, Jonathan sobbed. "He's going after the girl," he gasped. "Gabby. He needs her. Innocence. Bloodline. The thing inside him wants to be born fully." Sienna stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, terror sharpening into something hard and lethal. "Then we stop him," she said. "Whatever it takes." Jonathan looked at her, fear mixing with something like hope. "You survived him once." "Why?" Sienna touched the scar over her heart. "Because I wasn't meant to win," she said quietly. "I was meant to finish it." Far behind them, hidden beneath the hospital, the circle on the floor began to glow. And Art the clown tilted his head, listening, to a heartbeat not his own, growing stronger by the second. The church was supposed to be abandoned. That's what the record said. Condemned after a fire. Unsafe structure. Forgotten. But when Jonathan's car rolled to a stop at the edge of the property, Sienna knew instantly that the place had never been empty. It felt, fed. The old St. Agnes chapel crouched beneath the trees like a wounded animal, its steeple cracked, bell hanging crooked inside its throat. Snow dusted the roof in thin patches, but none of it touched the front steps. The ground there was bare, blackened, as if heat still breathed up from below. "This is where it started," Jonathan said, his voice barely steady. "Not Art. The other thing." Sienna stepped out of the car. The air smelled wrong, sweet and rotten at the same time, like burned sugar and old blood. Her scars prickled beneath her clothes, reacting before her mind caught up. They pushed open the chapel doors. The hinges screamed. Inside, the pews had been shoved aside, splintered and stacked against the walls like barricades that never worked. The altar was gone. In its place stood a massive mural, painted directly onto the stone. A clown. Not Art. Not yet. This one had human eyes. Sad eyes. The smile was smaller, uncertain, like it had been practiced in a mirror too many times. Above the mural, words had been carved deep into the wall. "Laughter is a gate." Jonathan swallowed. His name was Arthur Levy. Stage clown. Birthday parties. Cheap carnivals. He wanted to be seen. Sienna stared at the painted face. So the demon found him. No, Jonathan said. Arthur found it. The temperature dropped sharply. Their breath fogged. Jonathan continued, voice trembling. There was something beneath this church. Long before it was built. The clergy didn't seal it to protect people. They sealed it to protect God. A sound came from beneath the floor. A slow, wet shifting. Like something massive turning over in its sleep. Sienna's chest tightened. What is it? Jonathan hesitated. It doesn't have a name we can say. But it feeds on ritualized cruelty. On suffering turned into performance. Executioners. Gladiators. Public hangings. And now, viral videos. The mural's eyes seemed darker than before. When Arthur performed here, Jonathan said, the church was closed. No audience. Just him. He laughed alone, night after night, until the thing beneath the floor laughed back. The floorboards creaked. A giggle echoed through the chapel. Sienna spun. Art stood in the doorway. He looked different now. Less contained. The cracks in his grease paint had widened, and beneath them his skin looked stretched thin, like it barely fit what lived inside. His shadow didn't match his body, it twisted, elongated, sprouting shapes that moved on their own. Jonathan staggered back. He shouldn't be able to cross holy ground. Art reached down and picked up a broken crucifix from the floor. He snapped it in half. The air screamed. Sienna felt something inside her tear loose. Memories flooded back. Not just of the massacre, but things she had never lived. Crowds cheering. Blood-soaking sawdust. Laughter rising as someone begged. The thing beneath the chapel pressed closer to the surface. Art clapped. Once. The sound echoed endlessly, folding over itself. Then the floor split open. Boards snapped upward, shattered by something forcing its way out. A pit yawned open beneath the mural, exhaling heat and the stink of centuries-old decay. Symbols glowed red along the walls, burning themselves deeper into stone. From the pit came a voice. Not words. Expectation. Sienna dropped to her knees, clutching her head. She saw Gabby then, bound in red ribbon, standing on a stage that wasn't a stage, lights blinding, people watching but not seeing. Every scream became applause. Art stepped forward, dragging something behind him. A body. Female. Blood-soaked. Still breathing. Sienna recognized her instantly. Amy. Gabby's babysitter. Supposedly safe. Supposedly far away. Art shoved Amy toward the pit. She screamed as unseen hands clawed at her legs, pulling her down inch by inch. Stop! Sienna screamed. Art turned to her and slowly, deliberately, removed his hat. Beneath it, his skull was cracked open, not bone, but something like a mouth, stretching wide. Inside it glowed the same red symbols carved into the chapel walls. Jonathan lunged forward, grabbing Art's arm. You need me alive, he shouted. You said so. Art paused. Then he plunged his hand into Jonathan's chest. Not tearing. Entering. Jonathan screamed as Art's arm slid impossibly deep inside him, veins glowing black beneath his skin. The pit roared, hungry. This is why, Jonathan gasped, blood bubbling from his mouth. I'm the lock. Art ripped his hand free. Jonathan collapsed, but didn't die. Instead, the symbols on the walls flared violently, the pit screaming in frustration. Sienna understood then. Jonathan wasn't the vessel. He was the seal. Art tilted his head at Sienna, almost curious. The demon beneath the chapel surged again, furious, desperate. Sienna rose to her feet, shaking but unbroken. "You want a finale?" she whispered. "You're going to have to come through me." Art's smile widened. And deep beneath the church, the thing that wore his smile began to climb. The chapel would not let them leave. Sienna realized at the moment she tried to pull Jonathan toward the door and the world folded. The exit stretched farther away with every step, the walls breathing in and out like lungs. The pit beneath the mural pulsed, glowing red, beating in time with something deeper, older. A heartbeat that did not belong to any living thing. Jonathan collapsed against a pew, gasping. Black veins spider-webbed across his chest where Art had reached inside him, crawling beneath his skin like trapped worms. "I can feel it," Jonathan whispered. "It's waking up fully now. He brought you here to finish the ritual." Sienna stared at Art. He hadn't moved. He stood at the edge of the pit, hands folded politely, as if waiting for a performance to begin. His shadow writhed across the walls, splitting and rejoining, growing horns, shrinking limbs. Never settling on one shape for more than a breath. "What do you want from me?" Sienna shouted. Art's grin trembled. For the first time, he did something unexpected. He pointed at the empty pews. They filled. Not with bodies, but with presences. The air thickened as shapes appeared, translucent and wrong, layered on top of each other like overlapping frames of film. Faces stretched in frozen screams. Mouths laughed without sound. Eyes stared, hungry. An audience. Every victim. Every witness. Every person who had watched and shared and replayed his killings. They were all here. Sienna staggered back, bile burning her throat. "This isn't real." Jonathan laughed weakly. "It's the most real thing here." The pit surged again, heat blasting upward. The symbols along the walls rearranged themselves, carving deeper, spelling something Sienna understood without reading. "Begin again." Art stepped forward and raised his arms like a ringmaster. The audience reacted. Their laughter poured into the chapel like liquid sound, soaking into the walls, dripping into the pit. The thing beneath the floor drank it eagerly. Sienna felt it then, the pull. A tug behind her eyes, behind her memories. Images not her own pushed forward, Arthur Levy as a boy, alone in his room, face streaked with makeup, laughing at nothing because silence scared him more than ridicule. Arthur bombing at a birthday party, children crying, parents shouting. Arthur performing here, in this church, laughing until his throat bled. And then, the laugh beneath the floor answering him. "You didn't choose him," Sienna whispered. "He was just empty enough for you to crawl inside." Art froze. For the first time, his smile faltered. The thing beneath the chapel reacted violently. The pit widened, stone cracking and falling away, revealing something vast and shifting, no fixed form, just layers of teeth and masks and twitching limbs, all trying to push through a space too small to hold it. Jonathan screamed. His body arched backward as symbols erupted across his skin, burning themselves into him. He clawed at his chest, sobbing. "It's pulling me apart. I can't hold it much longer." Sienna rushed to him, grabbing his shoulders. "Stay with me. You're not done yet." Jonathan looked at her with wet, terrified eyes. "You don't understand. I'm not the lock." He screamed again as his ribs began to separate, skin stretching thin. "I'm the key." Art shrieked. Not laughter, rage. He lunged, but the audience surged forward, spectral hands grabbing him, tearing at his clothes, his skin, trying to touch the thing inside him. Art flailed, stabbing, biting, sawing through ghosts that reformed instantly, their hunger unending. The pit erupted. A limb forced its way up, too many joints, too many fingers, grabbing Jonathan's torso and yanking him toward the opening. "No!" Sienna screamed. She grabbed Jonathan's arm, the skin hot beneath her fingers, symbols burning her palms. Pain exploded through her scars, something ancient answering the call. The sword. She hadn't seen it since Christmas. But now she felt it, inside her. Not metal, but memory. Will. Purpose. Light tore through the chapel. A blade formed in her hand, forged from pain and fury and everything art had taken from her. It hummed like a living thing. The audience screamed, not in fear, but ecstasy. Sienna plunged the blade into the limb, pulling Jonathan down. The thing beneath the chapel howled. Not sound, loss. The limb recoiled, dissolving into smoke and blood that rained upward instead of down. The pit convulsed, walls collapsing inward as if reality itself was trying to reject what had been summoned. Art staggered back, clutching his head. His grin split wider than ever before, jaw cracking, revealing rows of teeth that didn't belong to any human skull. Sienna pointed the blade at him. "You're not the star anymore." Art straightened. Then he bowed. The chapel shook violently. The audience began to fade, their laughter turning to screams as they were dragged back into whatever space they'd been pulled from. Jonathan collapsed fully, unconscious but breathing. The pit began to close, but not before something was forced through. A shape peeled itself free from the darkness and stood upright on the cracked stone floor. It wore Art's smile. But it was taller. Broader. The grin carved directly into its flesh, permanent and bleeding. Its eyes were pits of burning red symbols, rotating endlessly. Art looked at it. And for the first time in his existence, he looked afraid. The thing turned its head slowly toward Sienna. "The show must end," it said, speaking through every mouth at once. Sienna tightened her grip on the blade. "Then let's give them an ending they'll never forget." Behind her, Jonathan coughed weakly. And far away, somewhere cold and dark, Gabby screamed, her voice echoing straight through hell. The chapel cracked apart like a skull under pressure. Stone split. Wood screamed. The ceiling peeled back in long, violent fractures, revealing a sky that wasn't a sky at all, black, swirling, threaded with veins of red light that pulsed like a living thing. Snow fell upward, drawn into that impossible darkness, dissolving before it could touch the ground. Sienna stood between two monsters. To her left, Art the clown, smaller now, somehow diminished. Still lethal. Still grinning. But no longer alone in his body. To her right, the thing that wore his smile. It moved wrong. Every step lagged behind itself, like reality struggled to keep up. Its skin looked stretched over something vast and unfinished, the grin carved so deep it split the face into a permanent wound. Symbols crawled beneath its flesh, rearranging, rewriting themselves as if searching for a final shape. Jonathan lay behind her, barely conscious, his body twitching as if something inside him refused to let go. "You don't get to touch him again," Sienna said, lifting the blade. The thing tilted its head. "You were never meant to fight," it said, its voice layered, children, men, women, all speaking at once. "You were meant to be seen." The air shifted. The chapel was no longer empty. Sienna felt it before she saw it, the weight of eyes. Millions of them. Watching through screens, reflections, memories. The walls dissolved into static, flickering images of Art's past killings, looping endlessly like a greatest hits reel of suffering. Every scream became applause. Art laughed. High-pitched. Delighted. He clapped rapidly, bouncing on his heels, pointing at Sienna like she was the punchline of the world's cruelest joke. "This is how it survives," Sienna whispered, realization crashing into her. Not just killing. Being watched. The thing stepped closer. The floor melted beneath its feet, turning slick and black. Every witness is a prayer. Every share a sacrament. Sienna's hands shook, but she didn't lower the blade. "You're scared," she said, staring directly at it. "Because this ends with no audience." The thing paused. Art lunged. He moved faster than before, a blur of white and black. Sienna barely raised the blade in time. The impact knocked her backward, pain ripping through her arms as Art clawed at her, teeth snapping inches from her face. He smelled like rust and old candy. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, just a moment, she saw it. Arthur. Not smiling. Begging. Then the thing screamed. A force like a shockwave ripped Art off her, slamming him into the far wall. He slid down slowly, twitching, his painted smile cracking further, splitting skin. The thing loomed over him. "You were a door," it said. "Not the house." It reached down and pulled. Art screamed. Not laughter. Not theatrics. Real pain. Something tore free, an invisible tether snapping, sending Art convulsing on the floor, suddenly smaller, weaker. Just a body again. Just meat. Sienna staggered to her feet. The thing turned to her. "Now you." The world folded inward. Sienna was falling. Not down, through. She saw hell not as fire and demons, but as stages stacked endlessly, each one hosting a different cruelty. Crowds cheered as suffering played out again and again, the performers trapped in their worst moments forever. At the center of it all stood Gabby. Alone. Spotlight burning her skin. She was crying, whispering Sienna's name over and over like a prayer. "No," Sienna sobbed. "I'm coming. I swear." She felt hands grab her, countless, desperate, trying to pull her apart, to turn her into something watchable. Then she remembered something her father once told her, long before the sword, before the blood. Evil hates silence. Sienna closed her eyes. She stopped fighting. The noise dropped away. The cheering faded. The screams dulled. She let go of the fear. Of the rage. Of the need to be seen. The blade in her hand dimmed, then changed. It no longer burned. It hummed. Sienna opened her eyes. She was back in the chapel. The thing recoiled. Art watched from the floor, eyes wide, crawling backward, suddenly very aware that the joke was no longer his. "What did you do?" Jonathan whispered hoarsely. Sienna stepped forward. "You made yourself out of spectacle," she said. "But I was forged in survival." She drove the blade into the floor. Light exploded outward, not blinding, but emptying. The images vanished. The audience went silent. Screens went dark across the world as videos corrupted, files erased, feeds cutting to black. The thing shrieked. Not because it was hurt. But because it was being forgotten. Art screamed too, clawing at his face as his grin peeled away in strips of paint and blood, leaving something small and terrified beneath. The chapel began to collapse inward, reality sealing itself shut. The thing lashed out blindly, grabbing Sienna and Jonathan both, dragging them toward the closing pit. "You cannot end a story without a witness," it roared. Sienna locked eyes with it. "Watch me." She let go of the blade. And jumped into the darkness with it. Behind them, Art the Clown screamed, not in pain, not in laughter. But in absolute, childlike terror. And far below, hell finally realized it was losing its favorite show. Falling didn't feel like falling. It felt like being remembered by something that hated you. Sienna plunged through layers of darkness that peeled away like wet film, each one replaying a different version of her pain. The massacre. The screams. Her own face reflected in Art's eyes as he realized she wouldn't break. The thing dragged her with impossible strength, its grip burning cold around her wrist, symbols crawling up her arm like living scars. Below them, hell opened. Not flames. Infrastructure. Stages stacked on stages, scaffolds built from bone and rusted steel, lights dangling from nowhere, all aimed inward. This was where cruelty rehearsed itself. Where suffering was refined into spectacle. The thing thrived here. It landed without impact, as if gravity knew better than to argue. Sienna hit hard. Pain bloomed white-hot through her spine, knocking the breath from her lungs. She rolled, gasping, the taste of iron flooding her mouth. The ground beneath her was sticky. Not blood exactly, but residue. Leftover agony, layered thick. The thing rose to its full height. Here, it was enormous. Its smile stretched wider, deeper, a canyon of teeth and laughter carved straight into its skull. Behind it, curtains of darkness parted, revealing silhouettes, watchers without faces, without bodies, pressed together in anticipation. An audience that never blinked. This is where stories finish, the thing said. When they stop being yours. Sienna pushed herself up on shaking arms. Where's Gabby? She demanded. The thing gestured. The stage lights snapped on. Gabby stood at the center of a circular platform, trembling, red ribbon still tied around her wrists like a cruel parody of a gift bow. Her eyes widened when she saw Sienna. Sienna, she cried. Sienna's heart shattered, and reforged. I'm here, she shouted. Don't look at them. Look at me. The watchers leaned forward. The thing laughed, a sound like applause ripping itself apart. Innocence is the best finale. Chains erupted from the floor, slithering toward Gabby. Sienna moved. She ran straight at the thing, pain forgotten, fear burned down to a single purpose. It swung an arm heavy as a wrecking ball. She ducked beneath it, feeling the air tear where her head had been, and drove her shoulder into its torso. She passed through it. The thing howled, not pain, but outrage. Sienna skidded across the stage behind it, rolling to her feet just as something slammed into her from behind. Art. He was wrong now. Smaller. Stripped of grandeur. The grease paint was smeared and cracked, his costume torn and hanging loose. He moved like a cornered animal, feral, desperate. He tackled her, fingers clawing for her eyes. Sienna screamed and headbutted him. Art reeled back, clutching his face, squealing, high, panicked, pathetic. For the first time, she saw him clearly. Not the icon. Not the monster. Just a man hollowed out and worn like a mask. You let it use you, she said, breath ragged. And now it's done with you. Art shook his head violently, tears cutting white lines through the grime on his face. He pointed at the thing, then at himself, then mimed being torn in half. I know, Sienna said quietly. I know what it does to the forgotten. The thing roared. The stage lurched, tilting toward Gabby. Chains wrapped around her ankles now, dragging her inch by inch toward a widening in the platform, an opening that breathed hunger. Sienna grabbed Art. His eyes went wide. Help me, she snarled. Or be erased with it. Art stared at her. Then, slowly, hesitantly, he nodded. Together, they turned toward the thing. Art screamed, not laughter, but a raw, animal scream, and ran at it, drawing its attention, flailing wildly, making himself seen. The watchers leaned in, thrilled by the sudden chaos. Sienna did the opposite. She stepped back. She lowered her gaze. She became uninteresting. The lights flickered. The thing faltered, confused. Sienna slipped through the shadows, moving along the edges of the stage where the audience's attention thinned. Each step felt like pushing through glue. The world resisted her invisibility. She reached Gabby just as the chains yanked her forward. Sienna grabbed the ribbon and pulled, fingers burning as the knot tightened, then snapped. Gabby collapsed into her arms, sobbing. "I've got you," Sienna whispered. "I've got you." The thing realized too late. It turned, roaring, but Art was already climbing it. Scratching, biting, screaming, doing what he had always done best. Performing. The watchers exploded into laughter and cheers. The thing fed. And that was the mistake. Sienna stood, holding Gabby close. "Close your eyes," she said gently. "No matter what you hear." She raised her empty hand. The blade answered. Not as light. Not as fire. But as absence. A shape cut from nothingness formed in her grip, a silence so complete it hurt to look at. The lights around it dimmed, then died. The audience gasped. Sienna drove the blade into the center of the stage. Silence detonated. The watchers vanished like smoke in wind. The lights shattered. The scaffolds collapsed inward, stages folding and consuming themselves. The thing screamed as its body began to unravel, its symbols flickering, failing without eyes to witness them. Art fell with it, still screaming, still reaching, until the darkness swallowed him whole. The ground gave way. Sienna wrapped herself around Gabby as they fell. Upward. They burst back into the real world in a storm of debris and snow, crashing onto frozen earth as the chapel imploded behind them, folding into itself like a bad memory finally forgotten. Silence followed. Real silence. Gabby clung to Sienna, shaking. "Is it over?" Sienna stared at the smoking crater where the church had been. She wanted to say yes. Then she heard it. A faint sound. Somewhere deep beneath the earth. A single, weak laugh. And she knew. Stories like this never truly end. They just stop being watched. Dawn came without color. The sky over Miles County was a flat, exhausted gray, like the world itself had stayed up all night screaming and had nothing left to give. Snow fell softly now, real snow, settling gently over the crater where St. Agnes Chapel once stood. No smoke. No lights. No audience. Just quiet. Sienna sat on the frozen ground with Gabby wrapped tight against her chest, the child's breathing shallow but steady. Paramedics moved around them, voices low, careful, as if afraid to wake something sleeping beneath the earth. Jonathan was loaded into an ambulance, alive, but changed. His eyes stared at nothing, lips moving soundlessly, as though still reciting symbols no one else could see. "Ma'am," a paramedic said gently, "we need to take her in." Sienna nodded but didn't let go right away. She pressed her forehead to Gabby's hair. "It's over," she whispered, even though the words felt fragile. "You're safe." Gabby nodded, though her eyes didn't look convinced. Innocence, once cracked, never quite fits back together. As they lifted Gabby away, Sienna finally stood. Her body ached in places she didn't know had names. The scars along her skin were quiet now, no burning, no whispering, but the silence felt heavy, like pressure before a storm. A police officer approached, notebook in hand. "We're going to need a statement." Sienna looked past him, at the crater, at the thin layer of snow trying to hide the wound in the world. "What do you want me to say?" she asked softly. That evil put on a costume and people clapped. The officer didn't respond. By noon, the site was sealed. Declared unsafe. Classified. The footage, what little existed, corrupted beyond recovery. Phones that had been recording went black mid-frame, files erased as if they'd never existed. Across the world, something strange happened. Videos vanished. Accounts dedicated to Art the Clown went silent. Forums emptied. Comment sections became blank pages. It wasn't censorship. It wasn't hacking. It was forgetting. And the thing that had fed on being seen began to starve. Sienna didn't attend the press conference. She didn't watch the news. She sat in a hospital hallway while Gabby slept, staring at her hands. They were empty. No blade. No light. No calling. For the first time since Christmas, she was just a girl again. That night, Jonathan died. Not violently. Not screaming. His heart simply stopped. The nurse said he smiled right before it happened. They buried him 2 days later. No headstone. No name. Just a quiet patch of earth beneath a tree that never quite bloomed right. Sienna stood alone at the grave, snow melting into mud at her feet. "I'm sorry," she said, unsure who she was apologizing to. "You deserved a life." The wind moved through the branches above her. For a moment, just a moment, she thought she heard laughter. But it was only the leaves. Weeks passed. Miles County healed the way trauma always does, badly, and in silence. People moved on. They always did. The massacre became a rumor, then a conspiracy, then a footnote. Without footage, without proof, it began to feel unreal. That was the point. Sienna moved out of her apartment. Too many corners. Too many memories. She took Gabby with her, somewhere small, somewhere quiet. Somewhere without stages. At night, she still dreamed. But the dreams changed. No more laughter. No more applause. Just empty spaces where something used to be. One evening, months later, Sienna stood in front of a mirror in their new home. The light flickered briefly, then steadied. Her reflection stared back, tired, older, but whole. She smiled. The reflection smiled back. Exactly on time. Sienna exhaled and turned away. Far beneath the earth, deeper than chapels and stages and memory, something twitched. Starved. Broken. Alone. It no longer had a name. No mask. No audience to give it shape. The smile it once wore had collapsed inward, folding in on itself like a wound trying to close. It remembered being watched. It remembered being loved. It hated the silence. A sound crawled up through layers of dirt and stone, not laughter, not anymore. Something smaller. Weaker. A whimper. But no one heard it. No one recorded it. And without witnesses, the story finally, truly, ended. Somewhere, Sienna woke from a dream she couldn't remember, heart calm, the night still. She rolled over, pulled the blanket tighter around Gabby, and let the darkness stay dark. For the first time, there was no final laugh. Only quiet. And quiet was enough.